This is the Real Estate Investing 365 podcast, your go-to source for real estate investing strategies so you can start living the life you want and get where you want to go. With your host, Justin Hanna.
What's up, everybody? Another episode, Real Estate Investing 365. Today I got with me Avery Carl. She's from Destin, Florida, up in the Panhandle up there. She's the owner and founder, I guess, of the short-term shop. Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Well, Avery, thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Why don't we start off? Well, first, you're in Florida, which is probably pretty nice. We were just talking offline about I'm in Idaho, as everybody knows, and I'm trying to get used to this cold weather all year round. Not that I'm not used to cold weather, but it's like, a high of 40 for weeks on end. So it's definitely not that way where you are, right?
No, it is not. And I grew up in the South, so I am not built for cold weather. My husband's from Nebraska, and I refuse to go there for Christmas. It's too cold.
Oh yeah. Nebraska's even worse, worse than here. But the Florida, man, it's like the humidity in the summer is, I guess you're used to it if you grew up out there. But me, I go out there, I'm like, I got to take a shower 20 times a day. Yeah,
it is definitely a sauna.
Yeah.
So trade off.
And alligators. Yeah, alligators all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, so why don't you give us a little rundown, like where you come from before, what you're doing now, how you got started in real estate, and then your primary goal, just so everybody knows, is vacation rentals, right? Not just Airbnb, but different kinds of vacation rentals. Is that correct?
Yeah. So my goal is really just to have as many doors as possible to meet my ultimate cash flow goals as possible. But I have utilized short-term rentals to get there more quickly because obviously they cash flow harder. They're a little more work, but they do make more money so that I can then go either reinvest in long-terms or apartment buildings or more short-term. So I've got 32 doors total right now. I am in the market for a 10 to 20 unit multifamily. So if anybody listening has one, hit me up.
Yeah.
But I started it out with short-term rentals and used all that cash flow to reinvest in the longer one. So it's basically a tool to be able to scale more quickly than if you just start with traditional long-terms.
Perfect. Yeah. And that's what a lot of people do with, like, whether it's wholesaling or flipping or just a regular W-2 job. It's just another avenue to gain cash flow. And that's most people's goal, is more long-term rentals for, cash flow, passive investing, and that sort of thing. How did you get started in real estate? Like, how did you even get the idea?
All right. So kind of a long story. I moved to Nashville in 2013 with my husband from New York City. And we obviously, New York City is super expensive. So when we moved to Nashville, we had the opportunity to actually own real estate. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have my license yet at the time. I was working in marketing in the music business. And our real estate agent was really trying to get us to buy in the super hip part of Nashville that's appreciating really quickly, or was at the time. And we just kind of weren't interested. We came from Brooklyn. We're sick of neighbors. So we bought something out in the country, but we had a little bit of capital left over. So we thought, well, maybe we should buy one of these houses and just rent it out. We didn't even know it was called real estate investing at the time. We were like, we're going to buy a rental house. And so we did. Had no idea what we were doing. Luckily, it ended up being a really good deal. And it's still our best long-term rental to date, 7 years later. And thank goodness. But once we got that first rent check, we thought, okay, this is something that we want more of. This is making money while we sleep, and this is something we want to pursue. So then we started educating ourselves and reading the books and listening to the podcasts and learning about the business of real estate investing. And we just had a very limited amount of capital left over. We had basically one down payment for one single family house. And so we thought, okay, well, what can we buy that will cash flow the most so that we can buy more of these quicker? And we landed on short-term rentals. We did not want to do it in Nashville because the regulations are just way too volatile in Nashville. They change constantly. People will pay a premium for something that is Airbnb legal, and then a year later, all of a sudden they can't do it anymore, can't convert it to a long-term because it was so expensive, and then you're just stuck. So we didn't want any part of that. So we thought, well, where can we go that's not going to be an issue, where it's just the normal thing for people to rent single families or condos on an overnight basis and not hotels. So we went to the Smoky Mountains, Pigeon Forge, Gatlinburg area, about 3 hours east of Nashville, where there's very little hotel presence. The entire economy there has been dependent on tourism only. There's really no other jobs besides that. Since the 70s, it's been totally the norm to just rent cabins overnight since the 70s. And because of that, the regulations are really, really friendly. The city's figured out how to monetize that decades ago. So you take that piece out, you've got 13 million people visiting the Smoky Mountain National Park a year, so you don't have to worry about tourist traffic. And so occupancy rate is great. And again, we had no idea what we were doing. We just did the best we could with analysis and bought one, ended up being really successful, scaled that into 5 over the course of a year and a half. And I got my license somewhere during that time because I was hating my corporate job, as many real estate investors get their start doing.
Yeah.
And when we were looking at these things, we realized none of the agents in the market that we were buying in could really answer our questions about occupancy rate and how to manage things. They would just send us to a property manager, and we had no interest in, I mean, short-term rental property management is an entirely different ballgame than long-term. Yeah. I love property managers for my long-terms. I don't for my short-terms, because the average is 25% of your gross, which is a big chunk of change at the end of the year. So couldn't find any agents who really had the answers. So I just bridged that gap and became that agent. And I started my company then, the Short-Term Shop. And we now operate in 3 states, soon to be 4. So we're in the Smoky Mountains in Tennessee, the Destin, Panama City Beach area in Florida, and Gulf Shores, Alabama. We'll be opening up Blue Ridge, Georgia pretty soon. And what we do is we work only with short-term rental investors, and we help them identify and analyze the most profitable short-term rentals. And then once we get them under contract, we teach them how to manage them. We have a whole back-end education program where we teach them how to set up their Airbnb and VRBO listings and get them cleaners and handymen, teach them all the tips and the tricks to streamline so that they don't have to go pay a manager 25%, and they can take all of their cash flow and go reinvest it just like we did. So basically just teaching them how to do the same thing that I've done that got me to financial independence.
Wow. Dang, that's sweet. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot.
And happened in not that long of a time, right? I mean, you
Right.
just started 7 years ago,
Mm-hmm.
and then, it took you a little while to get your second one, but then it's quickly started rolling from there.
Right.
The Smoky Mountains, I think I know a couple of people. I think my buddy Diego Corzo and the co-host of Bigger Pockets Rookie Podcast, Felipe.
Tony, both of them bought with me.
Oh, they did?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to say they have stuff up there. So
yeah.
That's interesting. Okay,
Yep.
That's good to know.
Yep.
So how do you kind of determine, what a good rental market or short-term rental market would be if you're going to go this route? I know you mentioned you want a place that has a lot of tourism, that has a track record of short-term rentals. How do you find them or track them down?
Well, I'll tell you how I did it, and then I'll tell you the easy way. So I did it because I came to the idea independently, just thinking about places that I went growing up where we rented a house and didn't stay in a hotel. So where I am now, Destin, Florida, when we would come to vacation on the beach, we always rented a house. Same thing with the Smokies. I went there as a kid with my parents, rented a cabin. There's places like that all over the country. And I mean, the easy way is there are lots of lists online now as the best places to invest in short-term rentals. But when you're analyzing, you don't just want to run off and buy a short-term rental in a place just because it's a fun place for you to go. You want to dig a little deeper than that. Mm-hmm. So there's 3 types of markets that you can invest in for short-term rentals. One is metro markets, like your Nashville, San Diego's, places like that. Those are going to be places that you kind of have to worry about the regulations. So you really want to check on that. The second type are the big national vacation markets where people have to fly to go to, like Hawaii, Disney, places like that. Those tend to be the first to see a drop in occupancy during a downturn, just because they're very expensive to get to. And then the third type is the regional drivable vacation rental market. That's the kind that I focus on because they're dependent on tourism, dependent on the short-term rentals. You got the occupancy rate, it's there. And then in a bad scenario or worst case scenario, whether it's a financially driven downturn or a global pandemic, what we found is people will still go on vacation in a financially driven downturn. They just won't go on as expensive of a vacation. So maybe they're not flying to Aspen to go skiing, but they will drive to the Smoky Mountains and go for the weekend because it's affordable. And with coronavirus, we found in all the markets that I own in that after the shutdowns, we saw a boom in bookings and the highest prices per nights we've ever seen because people really wanted to get out of their houses, but they didn't want to get on planes and be in a confined space with people. And they didn't want to go to big metro areas and be around a lot of people. But what they were doing was driving 5 to 8 hours from their house and staying overnight in a single family property because they could control their environment. So that's why I focus on the regional drivable vacation markets, because they just tend to be a little more resistant to the external factors like that. Yeah. And and also because the regulations are just much more favorable than a lot of places where short-term rentals are kind of a new thing as of the last 10, 15 years. Mm-hmm. So that's our strategy.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I have a friend that bought this nice place in Hawaii, and his plan was to Airbnb it or whatever he's going to do, short-term rental it when he wasn't there. But then right after he bought it, I think like some regulations changed in his part. I don't know if it's a subdivision or his town that he was in or whatever it is. And he wasn't able to do it anymore. So he was kind of scrambling, because he had this big mortgage on this place. And anyways, I don't know what ended up working out, but I understand what you're saying with that. That's a good thing to look for. So probably looking for more populated metro areas that have like vacation towns close within a few hours that a lot of people go to. That's kind of like where you want to look for, right?
Right.
Okay. And then so you mentioned COVID during this time. COVID had an effect in the beginning, but you saw a spike afterwards. And that's because people were just like sick of being in their house. That's what you're thinking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's not just in the markets that I'm in. That is something that a lot of investors have seen in those types of markets across the country.
Okay. Have you had to implement anything in your houses or in your cleaning services or anything extra that people are looking for because of COVID? They're like worried about germs or whatever people worried about with COVID.
There was a period there when COVID was still kind of new and things were opening back up, like in April, where there was a lot of talk about Airbnb's new cleaning requirements. But I mean, when you think about it, if you're not in the room breathing the same air as someone, then there's not a lot extra you can do other than, the standard that you would want the house to be cleaned anyway. You want everything to be sanitized. We had our cleaner pay more attention to all the handles of things in the house, like that you might not have wiped down always, like door handles and refrigerator handles and things like that. Mm-hmm. But nothing that's really either cost us any time or money in processes. Yeah.
And I would assume too, no matter what political side you lean on, but if you're buying in areas that are, a little bit more conservative areas, then they probably have less restrictions on that sort of thing. So, I know some people, Grant Cardone preaches that he likes to buy in Democratic states or Democratic cities because there's less permits and less building going on there. So he has more people. But then for other people, if they're going to, invest in single family rental properties, they want to be more conservative area because the tenant landlord laws are more favorable to the landlords. Mm-hmm. So I would assume it's probably the same way with short-term rentals. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it definitely did make a difference. So, the places I invest is rural Eastern Tennessee and the Florida Panhandle, which is very conservative. It's basically, like Southern Alabama almost, which is very conservative. And they were some of the first places to open back up. The state of Florida, the governor did shut down everything, but the Panhandle was the first to open back up. And then Sevier County, Tennessee I don't think they ever even actually shut anything down. I mean, the national park shut down, but I think it does make a difference. Like New York City was the first to shut down and the last to open back up. So it definitely makes a difference.
It's interesting. This is kind of a tangent real quick, but you said you live in New York and then you moved to Tennessee. I just got off a podcast interviewing this couple, Harvey and Dave, and they lived in New York and now they're in Nashville doing the same thing. And they have a real estate business there.
Yeah. There's kind of a mass exodus of New Yorkers to Nashville for the past 10 years.
That's crazy. Yeah, I know a friend from home where I moved from in California. They're moving to not Nashville directly, but right around there. So it's one of the hot markets for sure.
It is.
So what about financing with all these rental properties? Is there like different ways, do you just get conventional financing or do you have to buy them as second homes? How does that kind of work?
Conventional financing, usually. There is, for those who are interested in creative financing options, there is a conventional product called a second home loan, and you only have to put 10% down instead of the usual 20, but there are a few stipulations. And disclaimer, this is not lending advice, talk to your lender, but this is what I see people do and that I've done personally. So you can do 10% down with a few stipulations. The first one is that it has to be 65 miles away from your primary home. The second is that you can't put any sort of contract on the property, like a lease or a property management contract that takes control of the property away from you. And you have to have the ability to stay in the property for a certain number of days per year. Different banks are going to have different overlays on that. But generally speaking, I think the bank that I used, it was like 2 weeks or something. And I think we did spend 2 weeks there, not all at the same time, but over the course of the year, just doing things, getting it ready or what have you. So that's a really great option. You can also have one of those loans per market. So you could buy one in the Smokies and one in Big Bear, California, and utilize that as of right now. Who knows what lending will be in the future, but that's a pretty cool way to get started, especially if you're low on capital, because you only have to save up twice the down payment.
Yeah, no, that's actually a great product because all those things you mentioned is exactly what short-term rental is going to be, especially if you're not having a property manager do it. Talking about property management, how do you manage it? You manage it yourself, or do you just contract out to like cleaning companies? How does the management side go?
So we do what we call, and we teach our clients to self-manage. And what that is basically you have all of the apps on your phone for the major booking platforms. There are apps called channel managers that bring all those platforms to one dashboard. So, if you want to change something about your listing, you just change it in that dashboard and it blasts it out to all the different booking platforms that you're on. And then you just get yourself a cleaner and a handy person, and you can build the rest of your team out from there, because your cleaner is going to know a handyman. Handyman's going to know a roofer, things like that. So, but those are your two core people, cleaner, handyman. And there are apps that will automatically schedule on your cleaner's calendar and let them know that's when they need to go clean. So you're not constantly having to coordinate all that. So it really is, especially if you're somebody that is really trying to bootstrap and squeeze every last dollar out of something so that you can go buy some more things. Self-management is a lot of people think that you have to live there, or you have to live nearby, but you really don't. I mean, we have clients who are American expats living in China that are self-managing. We have active duty military in the Middle East that are self-managing while they're getting shot at. So it is a little work, but it's not hard work. It's just managing your systems. Yeah.
I mean, it takes work to like make a little bit of money. There's not very many things that are truly passive, I got into some apartment syndications, and, it's almost completely passive, but it's not fully passive because there's still paperwork you have to do at the end of the year. There's still like documentation that you have to do. So the better the return, the little bit more work you're going to put into it. So it just depends on where you're at and what your goals are. I'm glad you brought up the different platforms and things. So should people be posting on all the platforms, or do they just stick with one, like just on Airbnb and try to be a super user, whatever it's called? How do people navigate that?
Personal preference, really. I personally stay so booked on just Airbnb and Vrbo that I don't complicate my life with a bunch of other platforms. But I know some people have a lot of success. There are websites and little platform companies that you can buy. One's Owner Res. I can't think of any other names right now. They're escaping me, even though I see them all day long, where you can set up like a direct booking website where people can book directly with you. I haven't done that just because I'm happy with my income the way that it is. I don't care that I'm paying Airbnb a fee to do all that stuff for me. So, but there's a lot of ways. It's really just personal preference, but it's not really necessary to go outside of those two major ones, Airbnb and Vrbo, unless you just want to.
Yeah, I guess the only thing would be if you went to a bunch of them, as long as the calendars would sync up. You wouldn't want double bookings and all that stuff happening.
Yeah, and that's what those channel manager apps do. They sync all the calendars that you're on also. So if somebody books on Verbo, it blocks the Airbnb calendar and vice versa.
Okay. I'm trying to think what would be another good. Do you have any other good insights for people that are looking to get into this, or any things to watch out for when they're getting into short-term rentals?
The most important thing is to research the regulations to death. I get people all the time. I stopped selling short-term rentals in Nashville because of the way the regulations were. I still get people to this day who will, out of the blue, never met them before, send me an email and say, hey, I want to buy this $900,000 property in Nashville and Airbnb it. And they were ready for me to make an offer. Like, just don't even care. And I have to say, oh, you do know that is not zoned for short-term rental. And they're lucky they emailed me and not some other agent that doesn't know about it. You really, that needs to be before you do anything. Don't even look at a property until you look at the regulations.
How do you find out the regulations? Like, how would you know? And then how would you know if I guess you wouldn't know if the regulations are going to change.
So what you would do is call the city planning and codes department. That is generally where you can find that out. There are also pretty much every city now is going to have some Facebook groups around short-term rentals in the city. So check those out on Facebook. Just ask questions of other owners in the area because they're going to be in the know about it. But generally, want to go straight to the source, to the city codes department.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, that's good to know because like I said, or like you said, they can change on a dime. If you bought this $900,000 house and then all of a sudden you're not able to do it, or it changes a year later, it's like, man, what a bummer. What are you going to do with that thing? So where do you see the future of short-term rentals going? You think it's going to keep going up and excelling? I heard some talk for a while, that, government agencies were cracking down on it and things like that. But what do you see as a future?
That is true of a lot of the major metro areas. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that with hotel lobbyists. So a lot of the big hotel chains that have big presences in the big cities have big problems with short-term rentals. And so that is why a lot of the government agencies are cracking down in those areas, which is why I personally stick to places where that's all people have ever done in that area is rent houses. Because I do think that at some point, some cities are going to figure it out better than other cities. And some of them are not going to figure it out. And I just don't want to take that kind of risk personally.
Yeah. And if there's not a big hotel or any other amenities in the area, like where I grew up in the mountains in California, there's hardly any hotels, so the vacation rental was a huge thing there. So I definitely understand what you're saying. Have you ever heard of people buying like old motels and then turning each room into kind of like a small Airbnb or short-term rental type place?
I have, I don't know anyone personally who's done that. I have stayed in one in Tulum that was pretty cool. But now, you're seeing a lot of hotel foreclosures because of coronavirus, people don't want to be on top of each other. So I think that the single family model is really the most safe, for lack of a better word. Condos are fine, but I think that, same thing as hotels. When coronavirus was at its worst, that's the kind of thing that people kind of went, oh, I don't know about that. I don't know about a condo. I'd rather go in this single family where there's nobody. So I might have, if coronavirus had never happened, I might have explored the hotel idea. But now that I've seen that, I think I'm happy with all my single families.
Yeah, I'll have to get somebody on to talk about that because I think the same way you do. I'm like, man, I feel like that's the market's going down for that. But I was at my children's jiu-jitsu class the other day and there's a guy in there, and younger guy, maybe, a little bit older than me, and asked him what he did. And he has like 6 motels that he owns. I was like, oh, that's weird. How'd you get into that? And he said, well, he's buying them because they're like low on revenue. But what he does is he's changed them up to where people have kind of like Airbnb, like they can log into the rooms on their phone. There doesn't have to be any employees there except for, handyman during the day. And he rents them out as kind of like an Airbnb. It's just either for the night or for a couple of days. And it's just all over like an app on his phone. So the overhead's much lower. And I thought, it's kind of interesting, it's kind of taking like a multi-unit Airbnb model, but
and I haven't looked into it in the past 7 or 8 months since coronavirus, but there really was, or maybe still is, a big market for buying, the smaller roadside hotels and updating them and making them really cute and funky. Because I think millennials, especially of which I am one, like to stay in those cool places like that, and not just like a big Hilton.
Right. Yeah, for sure. One last thing I wanted to talk about real quick was the price appreciation. Everything's like going up and up. I mean, every market's hot on fire right now. And I'm sure it's that way in the markets that you invest in and then your clients are investing in for short-term rentals. Is the rental rates going up as well as the price of the property, so their returns are staying relatively the same? Or how does that work right now?
Well, I think that the pricing is just now starting to catch up with this being a real estate investing strategy, because it's interesting with short-term rentals because they are technically a commercial business, but they're not priced based on income. They're priced based on sales of recent residential comps. So I think that, yes, people who bought things 5-10 years ago paid a lot less, and they're probably making, their spread is a lot higher, but at the prices that things are now, in a lot of cases, not every case, but generally speaking, the cash flow is still there. You just have to analyze, how much can I get this property for? How much do I need to make in order for it to cash flow the amount that I want? If those numbers don't line up, just like anything, then don't buy it.
Yeah, for sure. That's one thing I always wonder though, is like, how do we know, that I'm going to keep rented? I guess that comes back to making sure it's an area that stays, is always popular. And then, making your house stand out. Is there some things that people can do to their properties to make them stand out of other properties and make sure they're always rented?
Well, in the markets that I'm in, as long as the property is something that is along the lines of what tourists expect. So in the mountains, they want to be in a cabin. So you don't want to buy a brick ranch house in the Smokies and expect for it to rent. Same thing in the beach markets. The beach house look is what people rent. Again, a brick ranch house, probably not going to work. So as long as I've found you don't have to go too crazy with making it stand out, as long as it is a cute, nice place to stay that is in line with what the tourism expects, then you're going to be in good shape. But I mean, I've been in like brand new $750,000 cabins with people that are going to rent beautifully. They're going to make tons of money. And some guru told them, well, you need to make one whole room a ball pit to get rented. And it's just not true. In some markets, like in Nashville, you do have to have the newest, nicest everything to get rented. But in the vacation markets, it's okay to be a little bit dated, not bad or in disrepair or anything, but it's okay if your countertops are not the newest, most beautiful quartz that you can get. So as long as it's just in line with the rest of the inventory and you have really great photos, that's a big part, is if it photographs well, then you're going to be in good shape.
Yeah. And it's just like any other business, treat your customers good and really provide a good product. I've stayed in a few Airbnbs, and I stayed in one like maybe a year ago up in Lake Tahoe. And the photos, like you said, they had great photos and the price was reasonable. It was like right a block from the lake shore. And we stayed there one night and we had it for like 3 nights. And we were trying to call the people and to cancel it because it was dirty. Like the stuff was trashed. There wasn't blinds on the windows. There's spotlights outside, like the surrounding area. And so I guess that's one good thing for the clients of Airbnbs is that Airbnb themselves was great. They hooked it up. The booking agent we went through didn't never return our calls. So Airbnb refunded us our money. And so the point of that is just treat it like a good business, make sure it's clean, make sure people are doing their jobs and get good reviews. And I'm sure you'll stay booked up.
Yeah, exactly. And you do get rewarded for your response time on Airbnb too, with listing placement. So, yeah, that's really weird that they would just not respond on something like that. Cause you get reviewed, I
know. I didn't leave them a bad review. I felt too bad because I did get my money back, but I was just like, man, like I was sending them pictures, like all like the bathroom dirty, the bed dirty, all the stuff dirty, and no response, just silence. I was like, Why is it that's so crazy?
That's bizarre.
But that's why maybe they're not doing too good. Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay. So, Avery, where do you see yourself going in the future? Do you see yourself buying, you mentioned in the beginning of the show, but your goal is to kind of get into bigger properties. What's the goal for the next year, 5 years?
I would like to, so the goal for this year is at least 10 to 20 unit, maybe two. I'd like to do the first one with just my own cash, and then, maybe get into doing some JV things or some syndications. Like, I don't want to lead a syndication. I will contribute to a syndication.
Mm-hmm.
Get into some of that stuff later on, but just, get some more doors, some more cash flow coming in. So last year, the goal actually was to buy a multifamily, but when coronavirus happened and the eviction moratorium, we thought, I don't really want to buy something, and we don't know if this eviction moratorium is going to get extended. So we ended up buying 2 more short terms. So I'm not out of investing in short terms just yet, just shifting the focus for right now.
Yeah. What markets are you going to look in for the bigger properties?
We're looking in a few. We really don't care at this point because it's really tough to get a good multi right now.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we had been looking in Pensacola, Mobile, really anywhere in the Southeast I am comfortable with, and Midwestern cities too. But
Cool.
we really don't care as long as it is a good deal.
Yeah, for sure. All right, right on. Well, where can people find out more about you, your company, and then if they have any questions about, the short-term shop, reach out to you that way?
Yeah. So Instagram at the short term shop is I run that one myself. So you are getting me if you send me a message there. So follow us there. And then also my website, theshorttermshop.com. There's a phone number on there that's textable, goes straight to my cell phone. And also, you can book a consultation if you're interested in buying in one of the markets that we're in. And there's email info on there. So you can get a hold of me a bunch of different ways.
Cool. Right on. Well, Avery, thanks for that info. I'm sure there's tons more questions people have. So if anybody has questions, get to her on Instagram or reach out to her on the website, and she'll be happy to hook you guys up. So thanks again, Avery. Have a great day.
Thanks for having me.